You're all aware now.
Good.
You're good to go.
Right. So my name is Kris. I have been working with Missouri Baptist Children's Home, which is who I work for. They're a contracted agency. So what the state does, they put out contracts for different areas of the state for different types of services that they're looking for other agencies to provide. So my agency bids on those contracts, has been awarded those contracts, and they kind of change year to year to a point whenever the state decides to like put out those contracts. They kind of follow their own timeline as far as that goes. But I was hired almost 13 years ago to start the licensing program here in Joplin for Missouri Baptist, because we didn't actually have an office here in Joplin. So I started that almost 13 years ago, and I've been doing that ever since. I now supervise the licensing program for the last 6 years, I think. And I have 3 full-time workers that work for me. And then I also supervise the treatment family care program. And I've got 1 full-time worker that does that. So I'll get more into that. But yeah, that's me. Married from Tulsa, live in Joplin now. This is home, I would say. It's home. So yeah, that's a little bit of me. So what I'm kind of going to do is we do recruitment meetings. We call them information meetings. So a lot of what I say, I'm going to say now that I do in those. So I think that I've got my song and dance routine down pretty well. So I'll be surprised if you have a lot of questions. So you can surprise me, but I'll be surprised. So, you actually have some numbers on the wall, but I was kind of going to start just letting you know that in 2020, obviously 2020 has been a weird year. So reporting as far as like number of foster homes, kids in care, like those numbers are going to be different from what they typically look like in a normal year. If you Google like Missouri CD annual report, which CD is Children's Division, if you Google that, Missouri Children's Division annual report, like that should pop up as your #1 hit. And you can actually look at their fiscal reports and see like how many foster homes there were, how many kids were in care, the different counties. So that's public information in your own county. So in Jasper County, this is by caseworker, so it's not how many kids were in a home, but how many homes there were that were providing these type of services by a caseworker. So there were 70 foster homes in Jasper County last year, and that were being used for placements, and there were 124 relative homes. There were 661 kids that were in care in Jasper County. And the average stay for a child that was in state care was 21 and a half months. So that's almost 2 years. The average age of a kid in Jasper County, so this is just Jasper County, was 9.6 was the average age. So when we have foster families that come to us and want little babies, it's like, well, hey, actually that average age is school age. It's like we're looking at kids that are about 10 years old. So I have those conversations often with prospective foster placements. So as a total, there were 7,386 kids in state care for the whole state of Missouri. And then this is a number I pulled up on there too. And this differs. Jasper County is a little higher than the average, but there's different numbers all over the state for the number of placements that a child has. Jasper County, the average number of placements is 4.5. So that's kind of high. Some others have 2. Obviously, some others are higher than 4.5. So I think the work that you do would help lower that number, right? And having like a supportive connection to a caring adult, like that would hopefully drop that number down. So Alana gave me some questions. I think that she had a really good outline actually. So I think I'll just follow her outline and kind of go through that. And then I think it will cover what I want to cover anyway. So she asked just kind of a general overview of the whole licensing process and timeline. So one thing that I would say, so I work for Missouri Baptist Children's Home, And we kind of do everything, where CD kind of breaks things apart. So you have someone who teaches the class, someone who writes the home study. You've got somebody that does the recruiting, somebody that does all these different parts. Whereas with my agency, we kind of do all of those things. So it gives me sort of like a more full perspective on how things really work, because I'm talking to the families before they get involved in the classes with the recruitment. I'm with the families when they're going through the classes. And then like I'm speaking with them too, like after they've been licensed. So I kind of have a full picture from start to finish on like what's going on and all of that, and what the needs are and how to meet those needs as well. So it usually starts off with someone reaching out to us, whether that's calling on the phone. They have a friend that's a foster family and they're like, hey, how do I get more information about that? I think that's a huge thing, because I feel like getting accurate information and getting all the information in one spot is a really hard task, because there's so many different sources out there. Oklahoma is not Missouri. Missouri is not Kansas. All those states are completely different. The training's completely different. The requirements are different. So I can talk all about Missouri all day long. I can't tell you anything about Oklahoma or Kansas. It's just different. It's not the same. So someone calls. I usually have kind of like a talk like I'm having with you right now. I give them what the requirements are, kind of like what that timeline looks like, the assessment process, just kind of like each step, and go over that. So that kind of starts off with someone calling, give them the information if they're interested. What I'll do is I'll invite them to an information meeting. They come, kind of hear our little spiel on how things work. If they're interested, this would be for foster homes, then they would sign up with us to attend the classes. So right now, classes are called STRONG. That's an acronym for strengthening, and Candy could tell you. She could definitely tell you about that. So that's an acronym for whatever it is an acronym for, and it's about strengthening families. So that's what we're doing here in the Southwest as a pilot training. We used to do a STARS class. That's another acronym for something else. In different parts of the state, in Kansas City, they're doing something else. In St. Louis, they're doing something else. So they're just kind of like seeing what might be a good training. And then likely, I think what they're going to do is like move forward statewide with one training. Our training right now is strong. It is, we haven't even taught it in person yet, because we were going to start it last year ago, February, and then COVID happened. So we've been doing them all through Zoom, where Children's Division made videos for families to watch, like an hour-long video, and then they would come to a Zoom meeting with us and discuss it for 2 hours, and then that was called the class. So we're actually getting ready to start our next round of classes in June, which is going to be the first in-person class that we've been teaching of this class for the last year now. So it's going to be really interesting. It's like teaching a whole new class all over again. So families are required to take the STRONG class here in our area. They have to take some type of foster classes to be a licensed provider. During that time frame, a licensing worker will come out to their home and do a walkthrough. They'll tell them exactly what they need to get their house to state standards. Things like having your firearms locked up, unloaded with the ammunition locked up separately, having a 5-pound ABC fire extinguisher in the kitchen, having a posted plan of escape, having emergency numbers, all sorts of different things like that. So basically, we'll walk through, just assess safety. If you don't have railing and I feel like it's a little high, I'll ask you to get railing, different things like that. So some of these things have very, very explicit rules and standards that we're following by. Some of the other ones are more gray. So that's one of the ones where it's like, do I feel like this is okay? Is it a problem? Is it not a problem? And then we kind of go from there. We'll do background checks. So families get fingerprinted. So we're looking to determine if they can meet licensing requirements and what the state has set forth by saying these are the things that are permissible. These are the things that are not permissible. It's being a provider for the state of Missouri. There's a bunch of trainings to complete too. Most of those are online. So all those have to be completed prior to the family actually becoming a licensed provider. We do medical exams. So we give them physical forms and they take that to a physician. And we want the physician to say, yes, we feel like this person is in adequate health that they can provide care for a child. We do personal references. So we do 3 personal references. Once again, I work for Missouri Baptist. We are a private agency. So our foster homes, we actually require foster homes to be able to provide a church reference. So that's kind of like our little niche that we're doing. So if a family cannot provide a church reference, then at this point in time, we will recommend that they follow up with their local county. So that would be Jasper County here. Children's Division is broken up into counties. So Jasper County has an office here. They take care of Jasper County. We have an office here, but we're in about 5 or 6 counties. So we have foster homes down in McDonald County, Newton County, Jasper. We have some Barton, Berry even. So we're kind of all over the place. We usually take about an hour radius around Joplin, and then our Springfield office kind of does the same. And then we kind of determine, would you use this family more than we would, or why don't you take them then? And kind of figure it out that way. And once again, that's based on contract. Yep, you have to complete the training. So for a foster home, these are the trainings you have to complete. Okay, you have to complete respite training. So that's short-term care that's provided to kids that are getting a break from their foster families. Okay, so foster family wants a weekend off, so they're going to this respite family for that short-term duration. So they have to do respite training. They have to have CPR first aid certification. They have secondhand smoke training, which is online. They do a psychotropic medication training, which is online. They do informed consent training, which is online. There's a HIPAA thing that you look over. There's an annual training that CD does every year that a family has to complete prior to being licensed, and that's about medication and things like that as well. And then there's prudent parenting, which prudent parenting, my unofficial definition is we think that our foster parents have a good head on their shoulder. So why don't you make the decisions that a normal parent would make and do that? So anything that doesn't have to do with like your surgeries or something that would need informed consent, why don't you make those decisions? Like the child wants to play baseball. What do you think? Does that sound okay? Does that sound reasonable? Do it. So can my kid go spend the night at the neighbors? I don't know. What do you think? Does that sound okay to you? Do it. So where we used to have background checks on families before somebody could go spend the night, which is crazy, right? So we don't do that anymore, which is really nice as a licensing worker, that we're not like running all these family care safety registries on people just because they want to go hang out with a friend for the night. So all that is for a foster home. If the family feels like this is a good thing for them, we feel like they're a good fit for us, we have that discussion. Our worker gives them a stack of paper like this when they come out to the house for the first time. They go through all this paperwork with the family. The big thing is the homesteading questionnaire, which is ours is about 16 pages front and back that our foster homes fill out. They give us information all about how they were raised, what their expectations are of children, what type of child they're interested in fostering or adopting, their marital history, you name it, it's in there. So our licensing workers write the home study. That's a requirement for the state. And ultimately, if a family ever wants to adopt, that home study is used. We're basically kind of like part of the interview process. And that's kind of like their resume that they're submitting for a child or children that they want to adopt. So that's what that home study is. I always tell our families, I was like, just give me something to work with. I'll make it sound good. So, because not everybody's on the same level as far as like writing things and making it sound fantastic. So it's like we help our families because we want them to sound. Okay, so that's foster home stuff. That's one license. So we also do relative. So relative placements are family a friend, neighbors, maybe a coach, a teacher, like someone that has an existing relationship with the child before they come in care. So we do relative work here as well. We have more relative homes than we do foster homes. I think we have about 35 foster homes, Missouri Baptist in this area. And I think we have, if I were to guess, I'd say we probably have about 45 relative homes. And then we have, I would guess, another 25 to 30 that we're working on licensing right now. So relative homes, if a child comes into care and they've determined that they have a suitable and willing relative, then they will put that child in that home. That relative then has 90 days to get licensed. So they do a preliminary check. It's called a mules check that the juvenile office and the sheriff do together, and they determine if that's going to be a potential placement. Like as far as background check goes, like these people meet the requirements as far as what we know right now. It's not a fingerprint, it's just something that they do in their own system. If they give the okay, and the family wants to do it, then they can place that child there. So from that point in time, that relative has 90 days to go through the licensing process with one of my workers. They complete almost all of the same training that the foster homes do, minus the, they don't do the rest of the training because they're only licensed for one child. Relative homes are not foster homes. So they're only licensed for one specific child or a specific group of children that were placed in their home. So they can't just foster any old child. It's not part of their license. They are required to take, it's called STARS for the caregiver. It's basically like the STARS curriculum was 27 hours long. The caregiver is a major crash course of what was in that class. That's what our relatives do. So we try to squeeze it all into 90 days, where our foster homes are really looking at around 120 days, and some of those kind of stretch out into longer bits depending on what we're looking at with, you know, maybe they need to do something where they need to put railing in or need to do this or that, or, you know, things pop up. So, yeah, our relatives do those things. We're assessing. We want to make sure that they're a good candidate. Other types of licenses we have, so there's a level A. So this is a family that takes an 18-hour class and they complete some competencies, and which are just basically like individual paragraphs stating that they understand kind of the main points of the class. That would be a higher level of pay that provider would receive for having a child that has elevated needs in their home. So a traditional foster child has a certain base rate of pay, anywhere from like $12 to $15 a day. The state provides so that that person can provide care for that child. Right? By no means does it cover everything, but it's a help and it's a support. You know, the kids also get Medicaid. They get child care that can be provided if they meet the certain qualifications for that. I just lost what I was saying. I was talking about.
Well, level A.
Yeah, level A. So, so level A, I was talking about payment. So you would get that base rate of pay depending on how many children you have. So if you have 3 kids, you would get $12 to $15 a day per child. Okay. So level A, you're getting more money to provide care for a child that has greater needs than what would be in a traditional relative or foster placement. Another addition to that would be level B, and that the Children's Division calls that career, which requires another 9 hours of training on top of the 18 hours of level A, on top of all the other things that I already told you that you're going to do. So these things occur generally like after someone's licensed. Level B placements or career, generally they're looking at someone that's probably going to stay at home if there's 2. If there's a problem at school, that person can go to school and pick up the child. It's more like a career, a job type thing. So they're almost, in a sense, paying them for the services that they're providing, as well as helping to offset cost of care. We have TFC. This is not a license, but it's a contract. So right now we're in a time where Children's Division is getting to release their contract for TFC services, which is treatment, foster care. We call it family care because we really want kids and families, right? So it's going to go out to the whole state, and agencies are going to be able to bid to provide those type of services. So I don't know what that looks like yet, but this is something that we've been doing for years and years and years. So I feel like we've got our program down pretty good with what we're doing. So it'll just depend on what that looks like moving forward. So the TFC contract is actually under the residential contract. So it's different. There's different requirements. Our TFC families have all of the foster home trainings, and then they also have crisis prevention training. They have 8 hours of trauma training. They take a medication training with our nurse on how to fill out bars. So it's very, very hospital-like in the fact where they have to document every medication that's given because it's under the residential contract. And that's something that you would have to do at residential as well. They take TBRI, which is trust-based relational intervention. We as an agency are a TBRI agency. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So they take an overview of what that is, and really it's just based on kids do well when they are connected to a loving caregiver. So connection is the first and most important thing, and then empowering our kids is the second, and then correcting is like the last thing. So it's usually when we talk about that, we're like throwing out old style parenting that really like focuses on correction and right, I'm in charge, you do what I say, right? Because like that's what I had to do when I was a kid. My parents were in charge of it, so now it's my turn, right? Like I'm in charge, you do what I say, type thing. So it focuses on that connection because our kids that are coming to us, like have had some tough stuff happen to them. Like they're coming from a really hard place. So that approach doesn't work. Like that hand top heavy approach doesn't work with our kids. Like, but focusing on that connection piece does. So I've got some other stuff for you later about that. So that's our TFC. So with level A, level B, more money, no support. With TFC, the money is comparable to the level B, which is around $55 to $65 a day per child. You can only have 2 kids that are at that level in your home at a time because they have greater needs. So like we're meeting those needs and helping provide that care. So with TFC, we have a worker that comes to your home specifically for the family and the child weekly, just for support. Like they're available 24/7. If there's a crisis, we're there. Like we're going to be on the phone with you. If we need to come out, we'll come out. 2 in the morning, we'll do it. Like we want to provide that support. We want to support the family and help them. And then we teach them TBRI, and that's what we expect them to use with the kids in the home. So we're focusing on that connection. We're focusing on the empowering and giving them strategies so that they can learn how to be empowered and how to like self-regulate themselves. And then once again, we are doing the correcting. It just looks different. So that's the TFC. We also have respite homes. Once again, that's something the state actually has kind of a crash course training. If a family wants to be a respite home, they're not a full-blown foster home, but they can provide respite for children. There's also medical homes. So a home that has completed CPR first aid and meet the other requirements. The child has to have a physician's form filled out that the caseworker knows about that says, yes, we're going to place this child in the home as a medical child. And then the family actually gets a little bit more money to help offset maybe driving to Kansas City all the time or doctor's appointments, missing work, those type of things for a child that has medical needs. And then we also do child specific. This is sort of like a subheading of one of the others, but we will have a kid that is not in a home that would be a TFC home, but we want that child to get those services. So we'll do like a TFC child specific home where we're going to provide those services to this family, get them the training, but after that child leaves, like they would not be a TFC home long term. So providing that support that the family really needs. So requirements, once again, completing the assessment process, meeting those requirements as far as background checks, the physicals, your house, because we're not only licensing you as a person, but we're licensing your home as well, like your residence. So if you live in a one person, one bedroom, one bathroom, it's probably not going to work. Kids got to have their own room. So like that would be a requirement, is that your home is able to provide the capacity for a child that's in care. Whereas with a relative, we would figure some way to work with that, because we say that there's an existing relationship here that's important and we want to do everything that we can. So we're willing to put some waivers in place and say we're waiving the fact that kids that are 6 and over need to be in separate bedrooms if they're not the same sex. We're willing to overlook that because we feel like safety is assured here. And this is good for the kids, it's good for the provider. So we're going to say brother and sister can be in the same bedroom, need to be in separate beds, but like we're okay with that. So because that would be not meeting one of the state standards. So we have to have a waiver to say we're not going to meet that standard, but we're okay not meeting it. And this is why. So you have to be 21 or older to be a foster parent. And then once again, I talked about Missouri Baptist Children's Division. So Children's Division will license unmarried, married, same sex, married, unmarried, living together. Missouri Baptist will not at this time license same sex, married, living together relationship. And we're looking at what that might look like moving forward as well. So, there's a question about background check process. I talked about that a little bit. So we will do, for a foster home, we will do fingerprints for the FBI and the state of Missouri. We will do a family care safety registry. So anyone in the state of Missouri that works with children has to be part of the registry. So I imagine all of you are part of the registry. We do CaseNet, which is just public information. We do a sex offender check as well. Family care safety registry does that. We're looking at that specific home and then letting the family know if there's a sex offender that lives within 500 feet of their home. If there is, then we do a safety plan to assure the safety of the children in their home. Say, hey, you've got a sex offender that lives, 4 doors down. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is what they look like. Don't let your child around them. They're outside, supervise them, right? So, yeah, so those are the background checks. So there's a question about what would cause a placement to be unfit or unlicensable after the children have been with them for a few weeks. So this would obviously be a relative home, because our foster homes go through the whole process before they can have any children placed with them. Our relatives can have kids placed with them, but we've done that preliminary check. So generally, that is thorough enough that we get a good picture, because we're asking them too. It's like, hey, do you have any criminal history? We're going to find out. Be honest with us, right? It's amazing what people can't remember sometimes. So it's like, you didn't know you had 5 DWIs? Like, how could you forget that? It's just like, seriously. Maybe she were drunk. So, so we have a decent idea. I have workers call me and say, hey, this is what they reported. Would this mean that they can't be licensed? So kids can be in homes that are not licensed, but they have to be a court-ordered placement. So, and then that family does not get the funding. They're not getting that $12 to $15 a day for the kids in their home because they didn't meet the requirements. So sometimes if a family doesn't want to be licensed, like we want everybody to get licensed because there's a great benefit to it. Sometimes families don't want to because they don't want to. Sometimes families can't meet those requirements, but the team, so the juvenile officer, the guardian ad litem, the caseworker, the other different types of players that are part of that team feel like this is a good spot for the kid. We want them there. We'll do a court order placement. And that changes by county too. Some counties don't like to do court order placements, some do. So some court order placement upon the child being placed in the home, others do not. It depends. So it's kind of like with our judges too. Judges are different in every county. Like no one's going to have the same experience because every single person on the team is different. The birth family is different. The kids are different. So like it's going to be all the way across the board. So that's kind of like my go-to answer when I talk to people. I'm just like, they ask specifics. I'm just like, well, I don't know. It just depends because I can't give you how it's going to work because everything looks so different. It's very complex, very complex. So what does affect a relative from being able to be placement, especially in regard to licensing, is if they've had a violent offense towards another person in the last 5 years. If they have some type of like preponderance of evidence. So if we look in the FACES system, which we do a child abuse and neglect check, if there's a preponderance of evidence or there's like a history of like concerns, where I'm just like, I don't know. Like they've had, 5 hotlines in the last 2 years, all related to the same thing. Like, I just kind of like wonder, right? Even if it wasn't like substantiated, it's like, what's going on here? So we look at those things, weigh in on it. Sometimes those decisions are made before they even ever come to us because we're working with licensing the family. So sometimes I'll make those decisions and my workers will never hear about it because I've kind of made the decision before it ever came to them, and then maybe it doesn't come to them. Or I'll say, hey, this is what I know. Ask them, see what they say. And then if they do have FBI, Missouri Highway Patrol history with their fingerprints, then we'll have that family sign a release because there's big parameters now around discussing fingerprint histories. I can't tell the team, I can't tell the caseworker, we can't tell anyone. I can tell them that they meet or they don't meet. As far as all the specifics, we have the family member request a copy of their fingerprints. We then give them the copy of their fingerprints. They can then share that information with the team or with their caseworker. And that's how that works. Like in the past, we used to be able to just talk to everybody about everybody's business. We can't do that anymore. So that's kind of changed. So it kind of really ties our hands in a way to be like, the caseworker is really pushing. I'm just like, I don't think it's a good idea. Like, there's things I know, but I can't say anything. So if that person's willing to get their fingerprint results and then share that, tell the caseworker what's on there, that's the only way that information can be brought to light. So it's a real interesting situation the way that it is. And that has to do with the Highway Patrol and the FBI and allowing us to disseminate fingerprints and that information. It really ties our hands. Training and support. So we've talked about the training aspect. So families, whether you're a relative or you are a foster home, you're required to have 30 hours of training every 2 years. So licensing periods are 2 years minus a day. I don't know why. That's just the way that it is. So I didn't make that up. So families have to have 30 hours of training. There's not waivers you can do for that. Like they need to do it every 2 years. So Children's Division rolls trainings out all the time saying, oh, to be relicensed, you have to have this, this, and this. So families have to take things on a regular basis. The first 2 years, you'll get way over 30 because those are the things you have to have. After that, you got to work for it a little bit. My workers and I, anytime we're aware of a training, like we email that out to our families. I've actually created a Google Drive where I've dumped tons and tons of resources and helpful websites, videos, whatever. I just dump things in there all the time that would be beneficial to them. We have support groups. My worker Angie does a book club. So they're getting ready to read through The Whole Brain Child, which is a really, really good book. They just finished, I think late last year, The Connected Child, which I would say is like 101 book you need to read if you're going to be doing what you're doing. Best book I've read probably as far as like child welfare stuff goes. Yeah. And that's about TBRI really, like connecting with kids. The Whole Brain Child kind of goes along the same thing where in child welfare, the last 10 years or so, there's really been emphasis on trauma, brain, how that stuff works, how we can work with the brain, heal the body. So like those books are kind of in that vein, which is really where things are going. I'm getting ready to start some lunch and learns. We've got all these videos on TBRI, and I'm going to start some lunch and learns where we offer it over Zoom for our families, and they can watch some video clips, and we'll discuss it together to have like some learning together. I'm also going to offer I'm talking with a local agency that's willing to host me, and I'm going to invite all team members, cost would be included. Same thing, like watch some TBRI videos and then discuss it over lunch so that like we can kind of get to know each other better too. Because I think that's obviously, right? You guys haven't even been to Children's Division office. So, so we haven't been together in a while. So it's good to get together and like, because licensing can be cut off from the team sometimes. Like we don't go to all the meetings. I have access to all that information. A caseworker will have, with our agency, a caseworker typically has 12 to 15 children on their caseload. That number can be higher with other agencies. A licensing worker could have 30 to 40 families. So if there's 2 kids in each one of those homes, that's a lot of kids. So I can't keep track of every single child that's in every single home that I might have. So if things are moving along with the case and it's getting closer to something big, I'll ask more questions. Otherwise, I just kind of ask when I do my visit with my family, hey, what's going on, right? Because I can't keep track of all that stuff on a day-to-day basis. So there is no difference in the type of support between foster homes and relative homes as far as the way that we treat our families. We welcome relatives into all the things that we do with our foster homes, support groups, all those different things. I would like to know if part of the training of foster parents includes how to keep kids safe and what to do if they're injured. I'm interested in gun safety. So when every single time a licensee worker is in the home, if that home has a firearm, we check to make sure that it's locked up, stored, unloaded with the ammunition locked up separately every single time we're in the home. So we do that. We do a visit every 3 months. So every quarter, we're in a home. And we've been doing those over Zoom the last bit. And with the Children's Division jumping back into full-blown in-person office stuff, like we're doing all our visits in person now as well. Unless there's a concern for COVID or some other sickness, which I think is probably good that we're doing that. I think Americans are bad about just going to work sick and not staying home when they should stay home. So I think there's more leeway there now. That's good. So the caseworker visits once a month, sometimes twice a month. So licensing, right, once every 3 months. So we don't see the family as often. But we're really heavy on the front end because we're visiting with you, giving you the paperwork, really hand holding and walking you through that process. Because we're the experts on our paperwork. Like we know what to do. If a caseworker looks at it, they're like, I don't know what to do with that. And that's how we are with their paperwork. I have no idea. So really, like I like to refer to it as like we're like the same coin, but 2 different sides, right? The heads and the tails, they never see each other, but it's still the same coin. So we're just a different type of service. Like I really feel like we're possessive of our families. because the child may bounce around and move from home to home, but the family is my family. Like they stay my family regardless of who's in the home, especially our foster homes. So relative, same way. If that child moves, like we'll close that relative home because it's not a foster home, right? We're only providing care for that specific group of children. So once those children leave their home, there's no need for that license anymore. So we'll close them. Our foster homes could have kids from different caseworkers, from different agencies, from different parts of the state, right? So they may be interacting with multiple caseworkers, but they only have one licensing worker, and that would be us. I like to try to, whoever I give the referral to out of my workers, I like to try to keep that worker with that family so that we can have that continuity and have the same worker that wrote the home study that knows this family stay with them. Because that's just good for everyone. Especially with our foster homes. If somebody calls and says, hey, I've got an opening for an 8-year-old boy. It's like, well, I know my homes. Like I know who's in what room because I walked through their home. I wrote their home study. I know what they're willing to accept, right? I know what they are willing and what they can actually do as far as like the type and level of care that they can actually provide, right? I know how to structure our families. At the same time, and be like, well, I know you said you wanted like 0 to 5, but like, I think you could really do this 7-year-old. It's up to you ultimately, but I think it would be a really good fit for you. So we do that with our families as well. So like in class, we talk about safety. We talk about how to keep your children safe as well. My worker, Angie, again, she's the one that teaches our foster training. And she primarily does our work with our foster homes and writing those home studies. Whereas my other 2 workers, Chastity and Stacy, they're the ones that do the relatives primarily. And Chastity teaches the relative stars for the caregiver class, and then Stacy teaches the adoption class. But we all kind of like do all parts of that as well. Adoption. So adoption is another class. It's a 12-hour class called Spalding. Might be an acronym, I don't know. So probably is. So it's a 12-hour class. It is something that foster homes must take to adopt a child. It's something that they must have before they can even submit their home study for a child for adoption. It's a must for foster homes if they want to adopt. Relative homes, it is a recommended class. So it's not required, but it's a recommended class. So our relatives can actually adopt children without having the Spalding class. But we encourage them to take the class because there's pieces in there that are important to know. People should know that, yes, you're adopting a baby. You're going to have problems later. Like people should know that and not be blind to that. They should hear it from one of us saying, hey, there's going to be bumps down the road and you need to be prepared for those things. And then that's okay too, and just normalizing those things. What is a licensing? What a licensing worker does, and how that differs from caseworkers. Kind of talked about that. The caseworker is responsible for the child, overseeing the case, work with birth family. I've never seen birth family, never. I wouldn't recognize them. And then, are there any circumstances that a CASA would and should interact with a licensing worker? What might that look like? Yes. So if there are safety concerns with the home, like I said, we're out there once every 3 months. So if you're out there in that in-between period and you see something, like let us know, because we want to address those safety issues. If the caseworker is not letting us know about it, we don't know what's going on. So we really rely on the other eyes that are in our home, those months that we're not there. And if I hit somebody at the beginning of a month and then I get them on the end of the month on the other end, it's more like 4 months almost that I haven't been in that home. So we would appreciate if you see something that seems unsafe, let us know. The caseworker should know who the licensing worker is. The caseworker can look it up. Or at least know who the agency is, and they can get in contact with me and I know who all those people are.
That's still something though, like, we probably want that to go to the caseworker first. And then,
Yeah, I think that's fine
yeah.
to address it that way. And then, so I put together some resources. So there's if you ever see a darkness to light training, those are helpful. That's all about reporting and child abuse and neglect and how to best support yourself and others in preventing that. Those are free. I've got a couple people that teach that out of my office that should be doing that. So that's darkness to light. There's a documentary that's free called All Rise, and that's about a judge in Texas who actually has a TBRI type court, and the changes that's made in that county, just phenomenal. Really, really good stuff. And then I put the book, The Connected Child, down on there as recommended reading. So I come back, better do it, because I'll ask. I think that's the big stuff. Any questions or anything like that? Here we go.
I have a two-part.
Okay.
So you said you have an office in Springfield. So if a family gets licensed here and they move to Springfield, does that licensing transfer? And would you ever have a situation where you have children in Springfield, there's just no fit there, you might move those children to, there's no extra training or anything that needs to be done?
Nope. Because once you're licensed with the state, you've met all of the state requirements.
Even though there's different, you said the STAR training and.
Right, but you've met the requirements to be a licensed home. Regardless of what those requirements were, you've met that standard. So now you're good for that 2-year period.
And so when, let's say, the juvenile officer takes away the children, do they call you next and say, we need a home? Are you the first?
I don't interact with the juvenile office.
So how do they find the home?
So the caseworker is going to contact me. There's opening lists that different areas of the state have. They usually go out on Fridays where it's like, Missouri Baptist, this is our opening list. This is the Children's Division's opening list for Jasper County. This is the Newton County one. So caseworkers have those lists. They'll look to see if there's an opening that would fit what they're looking for. I keep a Google Doc on my phone of like all our families with like what they accept. And then if they have an opening, if they've got an opening for maybe one, and then if they're full, then they're down here at the bottom. Because I can't remember, and I never get called, when I'm sitting in front of my computer and have that information. So it's like I need it where I can look at it and be like, yes, try this thing. So, yeah, and we will, like with Missouri Baptist, if someone moves from Springfield where we have an office to Joplin, like we'll take that. Let's say somebody moves from Springfield to Rolla, then they would transfer to the local office. So, because Missouri Baptist doesn't actually license anyone. Like we just like help get all the paperwork ready. And then we say, okay, state, they meet the requirements, license them, and they do. So they trust us to do our job, and we do.
Nancy, I think you had a question. You unmute yourself, though I can't unmute you.
You're muted, Nancy.
She doesn't.
Oh, she doesn't remember.
Press the space bar and hold down on it.
She's on her phone.
Oh.
If you tap your screen, does it give you an option anywhere?
There you go.
Got it. Okay, I got 2 questions. What was the other book you mentioned besides Whole Brain Child? The other one?
The Connected Child.
The Connected Child.
Connected
Okay.
Child.
Connected?
Yep.
Okay. And the other question is, does Missouri Baptist only use your own foster families? Like the ones that you license? Are those the only ones you use?
It's a good question. Nope, we use everyone. Like everybody has shared resources.
That's good.
So we've got kids that are from Children's Division in our homes, from Newton County, Jasper County. We use them, they use us. I mean, you're actually more likely not to have a kid that's with Missouri Baptist in one of your homes because there's not that many of us. So, I mean, there's 20 caseworkers or something. How many does CD have in the area? Way more than 20. So chances are you're going to have a kid that's not with Missouri Baptist.
Do you know how often they placed out of county?
That's a good question. I don't. I would say, if I had to guess, it happens often.
Just because of supply?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, there's always more kids needing a home than we have foster homes or relative homes to provide for them. And I mean, sometimes even those relatives, even though we're placing with the relative, that may not be in count. But what can we do to connect those kids back to their county? You know, I mean, obviously Newton and Jasper is pretty close on some way. So we could have a Newton family driving them to school until school's out for summer or something like that. Or finding some other means of a coach picking them up or a teacher or something like that. Or the caseworker taking them.
Anyone on Zoom have any other questions at all? Does that kind of give a good overview of what, as CASA, we were wondering about? Just a whole nother process that we don't know.
A lot of information. Great. Yeah, so if you're really interested in like boring reading, you can actually Google like rules and regulations for like licensing and stuff. There's a lot to read. Yeah. And that gets updated from time to time. And like with, you know, marijuana being legal for medicinal, right? So that changes with like, okay, so what are we doing with licensing now? Like, how are we treating that? Are we treating it like other meds? Do we need to ask specific questions? Like, what does that look like?
How are they treating it?
Well, so like if they have plants, which people can have plants, and they can have so many plants, it has to be locked up in like a part of the home or something that's inaccessible with like an actual lock on the door type thing. You know, we've done like safety plan type stuff in the past before there were like real regulations that Children's Division had, because those just kind of came out this year, where, you know, it's not something done in the presence of children. And obviously there's different routes that one could ingest marijuana, whether you're doing gummies or edibles or smoking or whatever that might look like. So, you know, I think that when we talked about it as a team, like I was like, I think we should normalize it as much as possible. And not feel like our families, if that's something that they're utilizing, that they feel criminalized, because like it is legal. So like that's something that should, I don't feel like we should have a lot of hoops where it's just like, I need to look at it every time, I need your card, like, you know, because there's a lot of other more dangerous medication probably than, you know, somebody that has a couple gummy bears or something. I don't know. So yeah, so we're kind of treating it like other medications, but should be stored out of a child's reach, locked up. And then use, you know, one of the standards that foster parents, relative parents have to abide by. There's lots of really good ones that are funny because people have done dumb things in the past, and now they've got rules for everything, right? Like that they should not overuse prescription medication, like that's an actual something that they say they'll do. So yeah.
Can they smoke in the same room with the child?
No, can't smoke. They're not even supposed to smoke cigarettes, like in a car with a kid,
That's what I'm saying,
in
like
the same room with a kid.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say that follows in line with the smoking in general. Even more so, probably.
Well, just about cigarettes, they can they, you know.
They're not supposed to, right? But we ask our homes not to have people that smoke in the home even, like we ask them to smoke outside. So we are, last I heard, Children's Vision was or was not, I can't remember, but we are actually, we're with the Council on Accreditation, so we're COA certified. So that's actually like best practice standards. So those are the standards we follow. So like, while the state standard is you can have 6 kids in the home, the COA standard is 5. So like we abide by that 5, unless once again, there's an extraordinary situation where we feel like this is best for the child. And then we'll talk about that with our supervisors and consider what that might look like. But otherwise, we follow those best practice.
I have questions, a different subject, and I know there's a term for it, but I can't think of it. I don't have a senior moment right now. When a child can't attach to a loving person, I think it's reactive.
Reactive attachment
Yeah.
disorder.
Yeah, do you have special training for foster parent to deal with that?
There's not like special training per se. I would say TBRI is really focused on those type of things with connection. Those would be something that you would be working with a therapist. Most of our kids are in therapy, so they'd be working with a therapist on those type of disorders and other mental illness type things. Any other questions? I told you.
Did a fantastic job. Thank you so much. And what we're going to do, so I've recorded this session, and then someone from Children's Division